Hello, welcome to this video covering paper 3, Nazi and Weimar Germany. This paper sees 3 sources, 2 interpretations, 6 questions overall, and it really is a bit of a beast. In this video, what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk you through ideas about questions, insight into how to plan and structure, and a few sentence starters as well. Straight into it. So question 1 is a source-based question. For this one, what you have to do is you have to make inferences. As with any source-based question, start off by reading it carefully, and you will want to read through and underline any key information that you spot as you go. So the source that I've got here in front of me, I'm going to rattle through it. I'm going to start off by just underlining or highlighting anything I see that's important. You need to remember with the sources and with the interpretations that these aren't taken in by the examiner. They're not going to be checked at all. So use it and make sure it's going to be as useful for you as possible. As you read through, what you're trying to look out for is you're trying to look out for any inferences that you can make. Now, an inference is something you can deduce from the source, something you can work out, but which isn't said directly. So here we go. I've read through the source in question. I'm saying from this, I can infer that the Jews during Kristallnacht were very cruelly treated, and then I need to back it up. Now you have to back this up with a quotation from the source. So I'm directly and using quotation marks taking a part of this short sentence and I'm writing that here under details. If it's a written source, it must be a quote. And if it's a visual source, be very specific about what it is you can see. About 5 minutes for this question. Shouldn't take you too long. Having done the 4 marker, you move on to an explain why question. You should have practiced lots of explain whys. They come up in most papers. With any essay-based question, I always start off by identifying the era, the focus, and the concept, making sure I know the time frame and what exactly it is I'm being asked to do as part of this. So with the question here, it's asking us about the German economic recovery in the years 1924 to 1929. I've written that down under era focus concept. With any essay like this, you want to start off with a plan. Now, a minute to plan this is ideal. I'd always do a mind map. I'm taking initially the points it's giving me as part of the question. So Gustav Stresemann, I've added a bit of evidence that I might choose to use. Mechanization, again, the second arrow shows a bit of evidence. And then I'm thinking of a third point as well. It's worth stressing with any question where it gives you 2 bullet points that you must add information of your own. If you don't, you're liable to see your mark capped. In terms of how I'd write this then, I'd use a point evidence explanation structure. I'm giving you some ideas about sentence starters here. When it comes to your evidence, specific factual information, names, dates, events, examples are key. And when it comes to explaining, I've got 3 sentence starters that I would use myself. This means, as a result, and therefore, with the final therefore, I'd be really careful to link back to the question. Therefore, the German economy recovered in the years 1924 to 29. Blimey, there we go. Next question. So, having done a source-based and having done an explain why, the next question is source-based analysis, just like you did with the medicine paper. In the source-based analysis, again, start off, and I know this sounds obvious, by reading your sources. Underline, highlight, annotate, make them as useful as possible. I'm not talking through these sources specifically, but feel free to pause if you want to look through exactly what I'm doing. I'm identifying key information. I'm making sure that I have something to talk about. When it comes to actually writing then, you need to answer the question about explaining how useful the sources are for a specific inquiry. And there are 3 things that you need to do as part of this. You need to make sure that you're referencing the content of the source, the nature, origin, purpose, that's the provenance, and using your own knowledge as well. When it comes to this, I've got a few sentence starters for you. So when it comes to analysing the content, I like to start by saying what the source shows. If it's written, I'll give a quotation as part of this as well. But the crucial part to get yourself into the highest levels is to say how this makes it useful. This is useful because it helps a historian to understand what. This is that crucial ingredient, that little key, which will move you into the higher levels, which lots of people forget to do. When it comes to the provenance then, you need to reference the nature, origin and purpose. Nature, what type of source is it? Origin, who wrote it and when? Purpose, Why is it being created? Again, the trick with this is thinking about how the nature, origin, purpose makes it useful. Does it make it more useful? Well, maybe say how. Does it make it less useful? Again, maybe so how. Say how. I'm doing both of these here. It's going to be useful in this case because it's going to show an honest view without being censored. However, maybe it's not useful based on the provenance because it's only showing one factory and may not reflect the general mood. If you want to look at this source in more detail, feel free to pause. But it's these sentence starters, the second one for each, which is what enables you to get into the highest level. When it comes to the third aspect of this, then contextual knowledge is vital. I would always start this by making it crystal clear that this is what I'm doing to the examiner. From my own knowledge, I know. It makes it nice and clear, it signposts it really, really nicely, and ensures that you'll be rewarded for what you write. Again, you want to think about how this makes it more or less useful. This limits or increases the usefulness because the second part from each section, this is useful because this may affect the usefulness, this limits or increases the usefulness, are the crucial parts of this answer. This is what gets it into level 3, and this is what would make this analysis top level. Do this for both sources. And we move on. Having looked at the sources, you now get interpretations, the writings of two historians about a topic within Nazi and Weimar Germany. Just like with my sources, my very first step is to read through these, underlining and highlighting, making sure I understand exactly what's being said. Now for this question, I'm going to be asked the main difference between these views. What does each one say and why are they different? So in order to answer that, it goes without saying, I'm going to need to understand the argument that each one is making. You can see that I'm highlighting as I go through, and as I do this, I'm trying to deduce what it is they both say. Having read through them, I've spotted a key difference. I've spotted something different between them. I'll start off by saying what interpretation 1 argues. So interpretation 1 in this case is arguing that the majority of Germans did not fully support the Nazi regime. I'd back this up with a quote, that's what I'm showing with the underline there, and I would follow on by saying how interpretation 2 is different. Interpretation 2 suggests a very different view. It emphasizes the dedication of the German people towards the Nazi Party and towards Adolf Hitler. I would then back this up with a quote as well. Make sure that you spot the main difference in this case. Make sure that you're identifying clearly what they say and why they differ. That would be worth spending 5-10 minutes on. For the following question, it's slightly different. Having said how they are different, we now need to think about why they are different. Why have these historians come to two different views? There are 3 possible reasons why they may have come to different views. Sources, their focus, or the emphasis they've placed. Sources will always be the easiest one to do, and you can see in the question, it tells you that you can use sources B and C to help you with your answer. I would start with this sentence. The interpretations may differ because of their use of sources. I need to add a bit of information about this, but this is why they are different, okay? The evidence I'm going to use for this is going to use sources B and C. So let's think about how this works. With source B, with interpretation 1, initially, it's going to have prioritized sources such as source C, and I would add a bit of information about how that shows people not supporting the Nazis. And interpretation 2 is going to be using source B, and this is evidence, obviously, of the dedication people have. Sources will be easiest, provide evidence from the sources as to why that is. Please, whatever you do, don't just repeat how they're different, say why. We go on then to the final question. This is a big one. This asks, how far do you agree with one of the interpretations about the topic in question? I've put these 2 interpretations up again then, because you're going to be using these once more. And at the bottom, I've got the view that I said interpretation 2 has. I'll recap this for us so that we know exactly what it is that we're arguing. So I've read through interpretation 2 once more, and I'm just going to start by summarizing the answer, make sure it's clear in my head. So the argument of interpretation 2, in this case, is that the Nazi Party enjoys large and widespread support. I need to say how far I agree with this then. In order to say how far I agree, there are 3 things that I need to tick off and ensure that I do to the best of my ability. I need to offer evaluation and judgment. This is the how far part, the weighing up. I need to offer analysis, which means picking apart the different interpretations, really emphasizing and showing my understanding of the views of both these historians. The final thing that I need to include as well is I need to include my own contextual knowledge. It's this balance of three things that you're going to be assessed on and marked on. If you fail to do any one of these, it's quite hard to get into top marks. It's worth emphasizing at this point, you also need to use both interpretations, not just interpretation 1, but interpretation 2 as well. And you should make the interpretations the heart of everything you say. I'm aware that might sound quite complex. Let's have a little look at what exactly that means. So I need to say how far I agree. So I need to offer reasons why I think the statement is true. I need to offer arguments against, saying why I think maybe the statement is false. I also need to give a judgment. So 4 paragraphs with an introduction at the start would be a good structure to follow, with the second and third paragraphs being the largest, saying why I agree and disagree. In terms of how these for and against paragraphs should look, I've got a rough plan for you here. Feel free to pause and look through it. So I'm going to start with something that I agree with in the interpretation. I'm going to give a quote to support it. That's the analysis. I'll explain what that means as well. I'm then going to bring in my own contextual knowledge. I'm going to explain why I think that agrees or disagrees with the interpretation. Let's have a little look at what that might look like then. I'm not going to read this out to you. Feel free to pause at any point, but I'm going to start off by stating something that I think is accurate about the interpretation. What do I think the interpretation gets right? How do I agree with it? So I'm starting in this case by saying that it makes the point that there's widespread support, and I'm going to use this now. I'm going to add in, a quote. This is very much part of my analysis. Okay, quoting from the interpretations is good. Try not to use too long a quotes. This one is 4 words. I'm going to add an extra quote in as part of my explanation as well. Don't fall into the trap of just paraphrasing it. Really try and show your analysis and the depth of your understanding. So I'm getting on to my explanation now. I'm explaining what the quote proves, what the quote shows, what it means. I'm demonstrating my depth of knowledge about what the historian is arguing. I've added in an extra little quote as well to make sure I've ticked that box as well. So having looked at the quotations, having explained what it means, I then want to bring in my own knowledge, my own understanding. And again, just like with the source-based questions, I'm going to signpost this. I'm going to make the examiner's life as easy as possible by demonstrating I'm using my own knowledge. So I'm going to include knowledge here around the types of groups people might join, names, dates, events, examples, all those kinds of things very much count as contextual knowledge. Using this knowledge alone isn't enough, though. Again, you need to link this back to the argument. How does this agree with the interpretation? How does it further the argument that's being made? This is a very, very rough structure for these paragraphs. Like I said previously, introduction, the argument for using both the interpretations and also using your own knowledge. A second paragraph against, again, using the interpretations and your own knowledge, followed by judgment is exactly what you should be looking to do. Don't forget to do the against. Don't forget to use both interpretations. All I will say now is the very, very best of luck. If you've got any questions about the paper, any questions about the questions, throw them in the comments below and I'll do my best to answer them. But the very, very best of luck when it comes to sitting your test. Thank you very much for watching, guys, and look out for the next video.